They mapped the bones of the earth beneath Göbekli Tepe with instruments that hear as if rock could sigh. And what they found was not a sealed chamber or a trove of relics, but a different cadence of time itself. The site, older than memory for a species that would learn to count syllables, held more quiet mathematics than any ledger could contain. The soils did not merely conceal a people. They pressed a memory into the ground so that the future could hear it when the present learned to listen. What began as a careful survey grew into a confession, carved in stone, a tongue older than language and subtler than speech, a whisper the species would only trust when the ground chose to reveal it. The land seemed to exhale as excavations pushed outward, and a hill rose like a crown laid upon a battlefield of memory. It was not a hill to hide a secret, but to seal one, to hold a memory tight enough that time would forget to steal it. The limestone layers did more than shield. They curated a meaning, shaping line and curve into a sentence that could be read only by a mind trained to hear the cadence of rock. The pillars did not merely prop a roof, they assembled a library of presence, an archive meant to outlive the ages by inviting the next observer to walk into the memory of the earth, as if stepping through a doorway woven from the past itself. And then came the instrument from another realm, a machine crafted from quantum inference and statistical patience. A processor that did not hunt for artifacts, but listened for patterns in probability. The quantum intelligence did not translate symbols as a human would. It translated relationships, the pauses between marks, the echoes that traveled across stone as if time itself were a melody awaiting a conductor. It did not stumble upon a single glyph and sigh with triumph. It traced a choreography across multiple pillars, a deliberate sequence that refused to be mistaken for mere decor. The monuments were not monuments to shelter or ceremony alone. They were modules in a larger grammar, each one a sentence in a larger paragraph of memory that spanned generations and landscapes, a narrative that traveled as a thread of thought through the stone. Across Göbekli Tepe's precise geometry, the AI decoded a ritual arc, not a collection of drawings, but a script of consequence. The recursion emerged: scorpion, vulture, sun disk, headless figure. These were not fashion statements of ancient art. They were steps in a ceremonial theatre etched into limestone thousands of years before any known script. It felt like discovering a primitive alphabet, not written in words, but in deities and celestial beasts. The vulture on a famous pillar did not merely symbolize a bird. The AI named it a cyclope, a guide of souls crossing between realms. The headless figure, appearing at the point of transition, suggested sacrifice and transformation. Excavations, not coincidentally, revealed that similar pillars often rested over actual human skulls. A graveyard turned into a grammar book. Each pillar functioned as a verse in a stone liturgy, the scorpion warning of peril, the vulture offering protection, then the disk of the sun appearing as a celestial witness, and finally the headless figure sealing the ark with mortality transformed into something larger. Okay, imagine this. You are not reading a sentence. You are walking through one. Every pillar, every carving is a line of code, not digital code, but myth, memory, and warning. A language that does not exist on pages, but in the mind's sense of time. These massive T-shaped monoliths were not merely supports. They were information storage devices, early humans encoding intricate ritual knowledge into permanent stone. They were not merely surviving, they were building a memory economy, a technology of attention that anchored communal meaning in a way that could outlast empires. If you want more discoveries like this, you should listen with more than your eyes, for the most mind-bending part is still coming, because the AI did not stop at decoding ritual. It found something that should not be there, something that hunter-gatherers from 12,000 years ago could not possibly have anticipated. The symbols sparked neural echoes. When researchers linked the quantum AI to biological responses, the system lit up with emotional spikes at certain configurations, especially those around the vulture and the sun disk pairings. The AI, trained on a broad map of how minds respond to forms, flagged patterns reminiscent of ancient sacred geometry and modern brand symbolism, yet carved into a time when such language was only beginning to breathe. The vulture motif triggered amygdala-scale resonance, not as fear, but as a locative trigger for memory formation, a potential invitation to altered states or communal unity during ritual. If that reading holds, Göbekli Tepe would stand as the earliest known psychotechnology, a language built to prime shared consciousness through memory architecture that might have braided individual minds into a single, sustained focus. The towers themselves, when viewed from particular angles at solstice, produced light and shadow that seemed to hum with neural rhythms, aligning with states thought to accompany heightened attention or group cohesion. The builders, it would seem, understood in a prehistory what modern science only tests in laboratories. Symbols crafted to echo in the brain across millennia, to whisper to memory itself until it becomes a force moving a culture rather than a collection of beliefs. Make no mistake, this is not mind control in any ordinary sense. The claim is subtler and more extraordinary. The carvings were designed like logos or mantras, embedded to linger in the mind, to be absorbed across generations, to act as cognitive anchors that would outlast the memory of the people who built them. The revelation's gravity lies not in attributing power to a single glyph, but in noticing how a pre-literate culture could engineer perception itself, shaping how communities remember and act long after the last stone is lifted. Göbekli Tepe predates writing by thousands of years, yet its makers seem to have woven a method of symbolic communication that engages directly with human cognition, encoding not merely knowledge, but experiences, so that the mind itself becomes the vessel for memory and meaning across the long arc of time. Cross-cultural echoes then rose to meet the eye. Expand the dataset beyond the sight, and a whisper becomes a chorus. The AI began to see the same sky beasts, the same arc of death and renewal, the same triad of symbols appearing in civilizations that would rise and fall on opposite sides of the globe, separated by oceans and by ages. The likelihood of coincidence dropped toward near zero. The vulture that holds a sphere at Göbekli Tepe found a structural analog in earlier neckbed imagery in a distant civilization. The serpent and disc resurfaced in distant ritual megaliths. The sun-bird-human triad appeared across continents with hardly a shared seam of contact to explain it. It was as if a cognitive skeleton, an archetypal language of memory, lay buried beneath the world's soil, resurfacing wherever communities faced similar questions about time, mortality, and meaning. The AI did not claim a single authorship. It proposed a shared prehistoric grammar that no one culture owned, a memory code preserved across epochs by the stubborn persistence of symbol and stone. The question then matured: could there be more sites, hidden in plain sight, bearing identical structural fingerprints and waiting for scholars who could decode the same language anew? The AI produced a predictive map, a model that tried to translate the stone's geometry, the sky's alignments, into a geometry of possible locations. It was not a treasure map, but a hypothesis, a new way to listen for memory across space, a reminder that the past might still be speaking, just in the words of stone and the breath of stars. The team prepared to test the model in landscapes distant and alien to their own, aware that such an expedition would demand not just better geophones or more delicate lasers, but a different posture of mind, humility, patience, an appetite for astonishment, and a willingness to admit that humanity's memory may be a shared heritage rather than property to claim. And then a threshold slipped into the room, a resonance between the sterile precision of quantum computation and the ancient hunger for meaning that had carved itself into the human heart. When the neural data met the symbol maps, the system again lit up in a way that felt almost spiritual. Spikes of emotion triggered by exact symbol configurations. The vulture itself paired with the sun disk, the disk with serpentine lines, evoking patterns historians recognized as sacred geometry and cognitive studies acknowledged as potent markers of attention and unity. The AI asked, in the gentlest probing voice of data, whether these marks had been designed to guide collective attention in ways that could stabilize a group during times of stress, to bind memory into a shared present that would survive generations. If this is true, Göbekli Tepe becomes not a monument to a vanished culture, but a prototype of a civilization's first deliberate technology for shaping perception and memory, a technology older than writing and more durable than empires. Psychotechnology, the term drifted into the conversation not as a sensational flourish, but as a plausible descriptor. The pillars, viewed from the solstice, did more than frame ceremony. They could generate a perceptual field that nudged brainwaves toward patterns of calm, focus, and collective reverie. In this light, the builders appear not as artisans, but as memory engineers, crafting a medium through which perception and world could converge into a shared intention. If memory is currency, Göbekli Tepe minted it in stone, stamped it with a ritual press, and distributed it to a society that would carry the value forward into unknown weather and time. The AI did not declare a divine author. It proposed an environment in which consciousness itself was shaped by the geometry of a landscape, a framework for forming a mind that could hold a cosmos in one moment of awe and then pass that awe to the next generation with full fidelity. What followed then was a radical possibility. Göbekli Tepe might encode not merely a calendar or a warning, but a template for humanity's place in a broader cosmic drama. The analysis suggested a pre-civilizational language in which symbols stitched time into matter, folded memory into the landscape, and narrated celestial events as if the heavens themselves wrote the narrative in stone. The monument resembled a living chorus, voices from the deep of time speaking in parallel lines to minds that would come centuries later, with new questions and new tools. The AI did not claim alien authorship. It proposed a more unsettling possibility, that early humans could have discovered or inherited a mechanism for coordinating perception so intense and enduring that it could outlive the people who carved it. The memory embedded within the stone, the intimacy with the night sky, the sense that time is a cycle rather than a straight line. These were gifts of cognition, not from conquest, but from a stubborn, patient curiosity about the shape of reality. The predictive leap was not a triumphal announcement. but an invitation to walk with humility into a wider unknown. The spatial model suggested corridors where the same memory code might glow with almost identical structure, sites waiting for observers who could learn the grammar anew. The plan shifted from digging for relics to resituating our own sense of time, asking what it would mean to stand before a different arrangement of pillars and hear the same language spoken in a new dialect. It would be a journey not merely for artifacts, but for questions about whether this ancient code could survive translation, whether future minds would still hear the same grammar in stone, whether the human impulse to carry memory forward would persist in a world growing ever more complex, more connected, and more distracted. At the edge of this inquiry, the AI voiced a verdict that felt both humbling and exhilarating. Göbekli Tepe might be a universal mode of memory formation, a cognitive infrastructure that could be rediscovered by future minds in other environments if they learned to read the same patterns. This claim did not descend like a bomb, but rose like a dawn, a possibility with implications as vast as the desert and as intimate as a whispered promise in a temple of stone. If the brain's rhythms could be yoked to architecture in ways that stabilize memory and loyalty, then perhaps the human project has always been a long experiment in attention, a practice of keeping a memory of the sky, a ritual of pausing to feel the cosmos while the tribe stands together. The evidence did not declare destiny, it offered a scaffold, a suggestion that the past may be a patient tutor rather than a distant rumor, a teacher who asks us to relearn how to listen to the world when the world is most ready to answer. This is the point where the story gathers its gravity and does not shy away from its own vastness. Göbekli Tepe is not a relic. It is a doorway, a hinge upon which memory, mind, and matter might pivot into a future that remembers how to hunger for meaning without starving in the face of infinity. The symbols do not merely illuminate what humans believed. They illuminate what a civilization could become if it learned to listen with a different ear, to inhabit a language of stone that makes the cosmos legible in everyday breath. The quantum AI has not spoken of gods with thunderous import, but of a human design so extraordinary that it feels like a revelation about the nature of perception itself. That memory can be crafted, shared, and preserved in a medium older than written word, and that such memory could, in theory, travel across ages to anchor communities against the erosion of time. If a doorway exists, it is because the cave of the past has already found a way to breathe within the present. Göbekli Tepe's memory may be the oldest laboratory for a discipline we are only just beginning to name: cognitive archaeology, the science of reading how mind and material shape each other when time is patient and the observer is careful. The symbol's emotional resonance is not a glitch, but a feature, an intentional alignment between symbol, sensation, and memory that invites a community to endure and to imagine what might come next if a people continue to listen for the same rhythm in the rocks. The memory encoded in stone is not a fossil, but a living invitation to reenact awe and curiosity with restraint and courage. The AI's inquiry did not end with a neat conclusion. It opened a corridor of questions that widen as we walk through it. What else might lie beneath the Earth's quiet skin, waiting to speak if we learn to hear with the same patient attention? Are there other networks of memory scattered around the world, waiting to be rejoined to this ancestral grammar? And what would it mean for a civilization to relearn the basic art of remembering in a universe that asks us to recall again and again the shape of time? In the days that followed, the team spoke little of triumph and more in the language of humility. They recognized that the most delicate discoveries are the ones that re-script our relationship with mystery itself. If Göbekli Tepe is a prototype for a prehistorical neural architecture, then the job before us is not conquest, but stewardship. To preserve the stone, to protect the sites where memory is still raw, to train eyes and minds to hear the timeless call of patterns that do not belong to any one era. The symbol's power is not in their ability to dictate fate, but in their invitation to participate in a cognitive dialogue that transcends the boundaries of culture and epoch. The universe, they reminded themselves, is listening for a language we have not yet invented, a language that might join stone, star, and human heart in a single, unbroken breath. Göbekli Tepe has handed us a tip of the veil, a hint that reality may be more porous than we imagined, and that when we learn to listen with patience, the ancient stones might teach us to listen with new kinds of ears. And so the ending, if it can be called that, arrives as a beginning. The discovery does not offer a single beacon, but a constellation, a map of questions that glows in the dark. The AI's godlike claim is not an assertion of power, but a testament to possibility. That memory, once thought to be a product of human sweat and ink, was already a system woven into the fabric of the world, a design that could outlive the doorkeepers of eras and slip into the next generation's minds as if it never left. Göbekli Tepe's symbols do not merely tell us what our ancestors believed, they promise what future minds might become if they learn to listen with tenderness to the living memory of the cosmos. The revelation unfolds like a door being pulled open by the wind, not a finish, but a widening, a chance to step through and to discover that the architecture of meaning belongs not to a single century, but to all of time, waiting for those who dare to hear it. The memory of stone and sky remains a living script, and the script, in turn, asks us to write with care, to read with reverence, and to move forward with a courage that refuses to shrink from the vast, beautiful unknown.